Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board. I'd like to welcome everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to, CLERB members, if you see your microphone, there's a little button. You press the button to speak and then unpress it to turn it off. Okay, and with that, roll call, please.
Eileen Delaney,
Here.
Marianne Pintar,
Present.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr. I'm present, Dr. R. Lee Brown,
Present.
Andrew Hayes, Nadia Keen Ayub,
Present.
thank you, Bonnie Kink,
Here.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Present.
Tim Ware,
Present.
and G.I. Wilson.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. Next is public comments. This is the opportunity of members of the public to address the board on any subject matter that's within our jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul that he can assist with that. Thank you, Paul.
Good evening, everyone. The first public speaker will be Kimberly Trimble on behalf of Brenda Arguelles. And you have 3 minutes to address the board,
Thank you.
and your time starts now.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Kimberly Trimble, and I'm attorney representing Brenda A., the mother of Alan A., whose case you will be discussing in closed session this evening. She is here along with her sister, her daughter, and a family friend. And we are all here to express our gratitude to CLERB's investigators and employees who worked on this report. They treated Brenda with respect, compassion, and professionalism during their investigation. During her interview, it became clear to us that the investigators cared about Brenda's loss and were determined to get to the bottom of what happened to Alan. We are grateful for their recognition of the systematic failures that resulted in the tragic and preventable death of Alan. We are hopeful that the board will also recognize those failures and make appropriate findings. Thank you.
Thank you, and our condolences to you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Karen Remus, who is attending virtually. Ms. Remus, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me, Mr. Parker?
You can, ma'am. Your time starts now.
Thank you very much. Good evening, CLERB members. My name is Karen Remus. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a longtime resident of zip code 92131. On March 4th, the San Diego Union Tribune published a story about the nearly $8 million payout to Frankie Greer, an Army veteran and mechanical engineer who was gravely injured while in sheriff's custody at the Central Jail. As you know, the County Board of Supervisors has now approved almost $50 million in payments for in-custody deaths and injuries over the last 5 years. The UT story also reported on Sheriff Martinez's reversal of her campaign pledge to release reports from the Critical Incident Review Board, the internal department panel that examines cases of deputy misconduct and error. CLERB members, I know that you, as well as the state auditor, have recommended that the Sheriff Department release critical incident review reports. The sheriff's refusal to do so is yet another example that it won't take the steps needed to bring desperately needed change to the department. Tonight, I again urge you to reach out to the state of California, be it the state attorney general's office, the state legislature, both, or additional entities, to ask for their support and help in your efforts to bring an end to the horrific loss of life and injuries occurring on the Sheriff Department's watch. Frankie Greer, Paul Silva, Tanya Suarez, please keep them and all of the other victims and their families at the forefront of your attention as you continue your service on the CLERB. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Deidre McLeod, who is attending virtually. Deidre McLeod?
What happened? Can you hear me? Mr. Parker? Mr. Parker? Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
On here, but not.
Hello?
Robin Sales,
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
we can hear you. Sorry for the technological difficulties. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Hi, this is Robin Sales. I speak as a representative of Showing Up for Racial Justice North County and a Behavioral Health Advisory Board member. Both the Showing Up for Racial Justice Behavioral Health Work Group and the BHAB Criminal Justice Subcommittee have a vested interest in seeing the San Diego Sheriff's Department work closely with county behavioral health services to divert those with mental health and substance use disorders away from incarceration. As the sheriff's deputies do not have sufficient training to work with that population, professional treatment should be offered to all those who need it. The Board of Supervisors and the state must fully fund behavioral health services so that on-demand treatment and housing is available. And the Sheriff's Department must be flexible enough to embrace the changes and change in its culture. I believe it can be done and appreciate the CLERB for taking on difficult issues such as these. However, I expect the Sheriff's Department to make changes to policies to protect inmates and prevent deaths in custody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sales. Next, we'll try Deidre McLeod again. Deidre McLeod? Deidre McLeod? Okay, next we will go to Don Bandy, who has placed a request to speak, although I do not see him in attendance. So let's try one more time for Deidre McLeod. Deidre McLeod, are you there?
Council, since we're having technical issues, can we go back to Deidre at a later date or a later time? Okay. So Deidre, if you could hear that at a later time, if you'd like to come back, just raise your hand.
We have no additional requests to speak.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next is minutes approval. Are there any additions, changes? Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by G.I. Wilson, second by Nadia. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Pastor Robert, Spriggs Jr., yes. Dr. Arlie Brown,
Yes.
Nadia Keene Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion carries. Now I'd like to welcome San Diego Sheriff's Department Detention Services Bureau Assistant Sheriff Teresa Adams Hyder. Hi, welcome. Thank you for attending tonight.
Thank you. Do I need to push a button or are we on? Everyone can hear me? Okay.
Thank you for your patience. This is the first time we've met in person in over 2 years. So like a lot of other places, we're working out those technical kinks. So appreciate your patience.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Teresa Adams Hyder. I am the Assistant Sheriff for the Detention Services Bureau. I've been in that role for almost 1 year, and I came from the law enforcement side. And when I came over, I came with a very different set of eyes looking at our Detention Services Bureau, and learned a lot along my journey. And I can safely say I think there is nobody other than the sheriff than myself who is more invested in this bureau in making the changes and looking at new ways of doing business and protecting our incarcerated population, working with the community, working with CLERB, working with our other justice partners to make our jails safe, to make our jails somewhere where incarcerated persons are going to get the services they need. They're going to do their time in an environment where they feel safe. The medical care they're getting is top notch. The mental health care they're getting is top notch. The programming that we can get to them is going to be programming that they need for reentry and reintegration into the community. And in this last year, my journey has been a challenging one. It's been rewarding, looking at some of the things that we have put into place, working with the men and women, not only our sworn, but our medical staff, our correctional counselors, our mental health staff, with the challenges that they have with the staffing that we have, which is a national issue for law enforcement. And despite the challenges, I think in the last, especially 6 months, we have seen some incredible success stories in our facilities. Are we perfect? No. Are we striving towards that? Absolutely. And I wanted to make sure, as a member of the Sheriff's Department, as a member of the San Diego community, where I could be impacted by having a loved one in a facility just like anybody else, it's important to me that the information we're sharing with you is true, is transparent. I will answer anything and everything I can to the point that I'm able to legally. But at the end of the day, I really want you to know everything that is going on in our facilities, because it's not just a sheriff's department problem. It's a community problem. It's a community issue, and we can't do it alone. We need partners, and I appreciate CLERB's partnership over the last few years. The pushes, the challenges, the recommendations, it all comes with the job, and I take those, and I think about them long and hard, and they're important to me that we come up with solutions that work. So this presentation is basically kind of a little update. I want it to be something where it's a conversation, where we're sharing that information to tell you what we've been doing and what we're going to be doing. And I'm assuming there'll be a little Q&A after, and I'll be prepared for that, I hope. So what I wanted to start with today is one of the things that we have instituted, and this happened in June of 2022, was a pilot project. And for me, I had been in this role for just a couple of months at the time, and a specific in custody death was something that I was looking at, the circumstances around it. And I said, there's more we can do. And so my team and I sat around and looked at a million things, just brainstormed. And what we came up with, as you all know, we do security checks, safety checks in our facilities at certain times of the day, prescribed by Title 15, prescribed by policy and procedure. And those checks are done and logged, and we get audited on them. And if we don't comply with them, then we have the BSCC and other people to answer to. So we started wellness checks. Now, it might sound like it's just another check, and are we doing them without really paying attention? My whole concept going into the Detention Services Bureau is I don't want us to be a check the box bureau. You can't just check the box in human life. You have to actually look at the people, assess the people, understand the people, engage with the people, and then figure out how we're going to tailor the needs of that person, because the needs of this individual in this cell are going to be very different from the needs for this person. And it's not a one size fits all. So wellness checks, and we started them at San Diego Central Jail, which is our downtown intake facility for men. And it was a multidisciplinary group that we put together. So San Diego Central Jail goes 3 times a week, George Bailey's twice a week, Las Colinas is once a week, Vista is once a week, and that's all tailored by the size of the population who we've identified and the needs. And so obviously Las Colinas is a smaller female population, so once a week suffices. San Diego Central Jail is a very, very busy facility with a population that is more vulnerable, as we call it. And so they will go more often. So the group will come together. It's a nurse or a doctor or a PA. It's a mental health practitioner. It's a correctional counselor. It is sworn staff for the deputies for the obvious security aspect of it. Then we have our classification deputies who deal with administrative separation in terms of housing. And they're constantly looking at housing. Is the housing the proper location for this incarcerated person at this time in their journey in the justice system? We also have correctional and reentry people. So we start looking at how are we going to reintegrate them? We're looking at their cells. We're saying, how are they presenting? Is the incarcerated person unkempt? Have they look like they haven't showered in a while? Do they seem to be decompensating for any reason? Are they engaging with us? Are they ignoring us? Do you need medical treatment? Are you afraid to ask for it? How's your mental health? How's your cellie? So we actually have this conversation with them. It's actually enjoyable. I go on them myself. So I try to hit every facility at least once or twice a month. It's hard because we've got a lot going on, but I think it's important. And if my staff see me at a wellness check on the floor, opening a door and sweeping trash out of a cell and engaging an incarcerated person and getting the mental health treatment, it's going to trickle down. And it's something that they're going to take seriously and know that it's important. So those wellness checks have been going on for almost a year now. We push them out to all the other facilities. The only facility where they aren't occurring is East Mesa Detention Facility because it's a reentry and that population is not the vulnerable population we have. And then South Bay, most of those are transitioning into prison. And so they're not that higher need population. And we'll continue to assess that if that needs to change. And we need to institute those at our other facilities. So it also looks at things like, does your water work? Does your toilet flush? Is your cell too cold? Is your cell too hot? How many things do you have in your room in terms of bedding and clothes and that type of thing? So it's very comprehensive. And if you can click to the next slide. This gives you an idea. We map out and chart every single wellness check we do by facility, and that will give you an idea. So since then, and this is from the 13th, we've done 27,069 wellness checks on individual incarcerated persons. And this is above and beyond the normal checks that we do for security, facility security, hygiene, et cetera. So I wanted to provide that breakdown to let you all know that we are charting it. We have that data, and we'll continue to have that data as we move forward. Next slide. And that's kind of hard to read here, and I apologize, but I wanted to share some success stories we've had. On this certain one, and I have to put my glasses on and off when I look up and down because I'm an old lady now. So I'm sorry if I look silly when I'm wearing my glasses. But essentially, this was a success story out of our George Bailey facility. And during the wellness checks, we had a mental health clinician who was engaging a certain incarcerated person who had acute mental health issues. And they were just resistant to any sort of assistance. And we were trying to get them into a transitional house, but this inmate or incarcerated person really only wanted to go to his version of what he thought was going to work for him, which was not working for what his situation was. So they tried to send him to the assertive community team for long-term housing. He resisted. They kept trying. Every week she went back. Every week she worked on him. She engaged his family and his mother to help him and try to come at it from a collaborative effort. Finally, after months and working with this person, and the incarcerated person realized, hey, this person cares about me. This person is actually trying to help me. They're coming back. They're saying, they're doing what they say they're going to do. They're engaging me. Finally, after several months, there was a breakthrough, and the incarcerated person said, I'm tired. I'm ready. I want to go. Help me. And so she worked through the hoops, and she was able to get him into the transitional home that worked for him, that was going to make him successful. And he wrote her a thank you note, and he told her thank you, which we don't hear that often. And it's nice to hear that, you know, coming from anybody. And so it was a very successful story that I wanted to share for you. Next one. The next one comes from Las Colinas. And so this was a female who was in custody. And at first she was acting as she normally should. She wasn't super engaging with staff or other incarcerated persons, but she was maintaining. As we visited her on and off, we started to see her kind of just not react at all. She was becoming a little more violent. She was becoming more aggressive. She wasn't responding to anybody. We were worried about her flooding her cell and being destructive. So while she didn't start off in that situation, we started seeing her devolving, which is a concern, and we don't want that to happen to our population. This is the population where if you don't start paying special attention to them, you know, something bad can happen, and we don't want that to happen. So we actually were able to put her into our PSU unit and tailored a program to her. And in PSU, she was able to thrive better than she would have in the cell that she was in a more administrative separation sort of location. And she started to engage, she started to come out of her cell. And then we were actually at that point able to engage her for restoration for competency. And then she was able to be transferred to the Department of State hospitals so they could actually work on her wellness plan for her in her criminal justice journey. And so that was another success story where someone we saw, we were paying attention and realized she needed the extra care. So go ahead. This last one is a success story, and it came from our Vista detention facility. This is actually from an incarcerated person. He wrote me a letter. I actually spoke to him myself in one of our visits. He's actually, he's in for a serious felony. He is a Marine Corps veteran, and he's been in and out of the system for a while. And I talked to him at length, and he was very, very appreciative. And if you want to read it, I think his words are better than mine about what's going on in Vista and how happy he is we're doing the program. I'll give you a few seconds to read that. Because so, you know, once again, we don't get thank yous often, and this was a thank you. And it was a testament to how much the deputies and my professional staff and my medical staff have taken on with this wellness program. And it is impactful. And no longer are we worrying that we're going to have somebody slip through the cracks, because nobody should slip through our cracks. They're in our custody and care, period. And this program is something that we have brought to the table and we will continue to do. And it's part of our normal everyday operations. And I wanted to share that with you because I think, you know, this is something CLERB I feel strongly about. I think that's something that you would probably advocate for. And this is how I do business. This is how my commanders do business. And this is how my deputy sheriffs will do business going forward with our wellness checks. So next slide. So moving from our wellness check program that we have, I wanted to get into some narcotic interdiction program. So as you know, some of our in custody deaths over the last few years were as a result of ingestion or use of controlled substance narcotics, namely fentanyl, and just how they're getting in the jail and what can we do to keep this harmful, deadly narcotic out of our facilities. I mean, it's spreading nationwide and we're seeing it in other areas of the country as well. But my concern is the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. So what am I going to do here at home? So what we have done is we have at San Diego Central Jail, which is always my pilot project because it's a busy jail. We have identified deputy sheriffs on all of the 4 shifts. So as you know, we do 12.5-hour shifts, 24/7, which is 4 shifts. And so on each shift, deputies have been hand selected to become subject matter experts in all things narcotics interdiction, body smuggling. They're using an intelligence-led policing concept, which you may or may not be familiar with it, but it's very common in our law enforcement world. So we're taking those concepts of who are the ones that are at risk for body carrying, who is most likely going to be body carrying, who's been threatened into body carrying, which is very common in our jails. Where are they carrying it? Where is it going? How are they getting it in from one point to another? And so they have become subject matter experts in that. And we have, there's some courses there that we have sent them to. And then we'll start in April, 2023 for Vista Jail with the same program. Next slide. And so what this new process is it's called our secondary process. So all incarcerated persons will come in and they will, during the intake, they will have a body scan. And I think if you've toured our facilities, you have seen our body scan. We recently changed from one vendor to another vendor, which is, I think, just a product that can see it from different angles and actually easier for deputies to interpret. Because mind you, our deputies are not doctors and they don't read x-rays, but this body scan is something that has been changed for that lay person, for that deputy sheriff. So if they do have an abnormality in that first initial scan, they can, with medical approval, then go to a body x-ray, whether it's a abdominal or a pelvic or a hip-centered x-ray to see if there indeed is something in there that needs to be removed, which is then, they are then refused at the booking, or if they have already been accepted into our booking, they're going to go to our local emergency rooms to have a doctor review that, because a doctor is the one who would have to have it removed because we don't do that. And if they go to the doctor and then the doctor says, hey, there's nothing in there, or I don't see that, or in some cases, some doctors say, I'm not getting involved with that, they will come back to the facility and we put them in what we call the contraband watch and secondary process. So we have now designated areas where the incarcerated person will never mix with the rest of the population who by all accounts has passed all the booking and intake. Nothing is abnormal with them. There's no intelligence that's leading us to believe there's going to be a body carrying issue or an overdose if that body carrying bag ruptures, which is unfortunately what always happens. So we put them in an area. They have full access to telephones. They can bail. They get bathrooms. Water. But their bathroom is, and we have these on purchase, is a special loo. That's the name, contraband loo, and it's placed into this what we call dry cell. And then the rest, I'm sure you can figure out what happens. And so what comes out is now locked, and they don't have access to it. So they can't touch it. They can't overdose from it, hopefully. And so we'll wait for that, and they'll be on the contraband watch. And then we'll do, when they pass it, usually by that point, they just want out because they don't want to be in anymore. Nobody wants to be in a cell with a loo and the sink and your thoughts. I mean, they want to get out. They want to finish their booking process. And so we take them out, and then we scan them again, and then we go through the process and we medically clear them again. And when we feel that they're safe to go into mainline housing, we put them into the mainline housing, and we hope all is well. We are also looking at, with Court Services Bureau, when our incarcerated population go out to court, they're leaving our facility. So now, while they're out of our care in our facilities, they're with the transportation deputy, then they go to our Court Services Bureau, and they're with the Court Services Bureau deputies, but they're going to come back. And we don't always know. They've been talking to lawyers, paralegals, they've had contact with other individuals. It's important for me that when they come back, they're being checked again for narcotics and contraband. So we took more body scanners that we had in our facility. We have now moved those body scanners to Court Services Bureau. Court Services Bureau will now be scanning the incarcerated population when they're leaving and coming back from court. So it's not rush, getting back to court. It's the end of the day. It's shift change. We're just going to put them back. No, we're not doing that. There are no shortcuts. They are getting scanned. They're getting patted down. And in some cases, we're going to alternate, and this group may get scanned, that might get patted down, and that group might have a whole clothing exchange. They shake out their clothing. So they never know where they're going to go. So that's another process we have put into our contraband interdiction program. Next slide, please. And this kind of goes into what I alluded to with the intelligence-led policing, and it's really to cut those overdoses and to get that fentanyl out of my facility, because I will not stand for fentanyl in my facilities at all. And then there's an accountability part. And as I spoke to earlier, this is not only a sheriff's problem, but it's a community problem. And our law enforcement partners have been very accommodating. When we started doing things like urine screening at intake, they worked with us on that. When we told them, and I'm just going to go, we used to do a wall of shame. And the wall of shame was if contraband came into our jail, like a weapon or drugs, a picture was taken and put on a wall. That doesn't work because that arresting officer may not come back for months. So now we actually say, hey, agency, this contraband was found on this individual. We just want to make sure that everyone's doing safe pat downs out in the field and making sure there's no weapons or drugs on people. So there has been a lot of support for the sheriff's department from our regional partners on making sure our incarcerated persons are patted down safely and thoroughly, because it's easy to miss. I don't know if anyone's ever patted down a person, but it's easy to miss things on people. Your people are wearing a lot of layers, especially if someone is unsheltered. They have a lot of layers on them, and it's hard to feel what's in there. So that is, I'm very thankful for our justice partners for helping us on this journey as well. Next slide. Oh yeah, you can't miss all my cool tools. So part of this pilot project also is we've used mirrors. That's nothing new in searches for our facilities. But in addition to the portaloos, we have these, you can see them in there. It's a very long handle with a very big mirror. And you see the deputy putting it underneath the toilet and in crevices and sinks. Every time and multiple times throughout the shift, those intake cells are very busy. People are in, people are out. And deputies are going in before shifts, after shifts, during shifts, as incarcerated persons are moved in and out, and they're searching those cells multiple times a day. There is no excuse for any narcotics or weapons or anything that is found and then hidden in a cell to be picked up by another person later on. So these tools will get into those, and there's some pry bars to get things. I mean, I've laid on the ground myself and tried to go under those toilets. It's not pleasant. I'm not going to say it is. It's not. So this tool helps you get in there, and they're very efficient. So those are some enhanced search tools that we're using, and those are going to be department-wide. Next slide. I wanted to share some of the finds we've had. Most of what you see there is fentanyl. Those were all found on the individuals as they were coming into intake and didn't make it outside. Within that Sally Port where we pat them down, that's where we found all of that. That's what's coming in to our facility on people who are getting arrested. It's alarming, very alarming. Some of them are body carries, and those are usually the ones that are in those little round bags because they pack them in a distinct way. Next slide. So just to give you an idea of the interdiction impact since we've started this at San Diego Central Jail in January, if you look at the comparison from September to December of last year, there were 31 naloxone deployments. From January to present, 16. So you can tell that this is having an impact on our population. They are not overdosing on the fentanyl like they had been previously because of this new interdiction and secondary process we put into place. And then you can see the related fines we've had for drugs, 92, mostly fentanyl, 29 weapons, and 50 minor contraband fines, compared to 6 the 3 months from September to December. So we are getting good at this. This is happening. My deputies are working very hard because they know this is what they need to do. This is important to us. It's important to the sheriff. It's important to the community. It's important to the families of the incarcerated individuals who are in there. And this is what we're doing, and it's working. Next slide. Moving on to mental health programs. And I know Robin had mentioned something earlier, and I've talked to Robin about, mental health in our facilities as well. We have multiple I can never say that word. It's so hard. Multidisciplinary group meetings. And that's similar to our wellness groups, but now every week they sit down and it's basically case management with our mental health professionals, with our psychiatrists, with our psychologists, with our nurses, with our deputies, with our reentry. And they look at the ways that we can tailor what we need to do for these individuals. Like I said, it's not one size fits all. It's not a check the box. It's what does this individual need for how they're presenting right now? What can we do? So those have been going really well. The deputies are involved, but the deputies aren't making the mental health decisions. It's our mental health staff. Deputies are there for the security, but deputies have to be aware of what's going on. Deputies have to know the signs and symptoms of somebody who's in crisis, somebody who's been triggered, and they're getting that training as well. So one of the issues that I saw, we would have forensic psychiatrists come in to do assessments on our IST, which is incompetent to stand trial population, or just population. They would come in, and there were some occasions when I first got here where I said, who did they talk to? Who did they share the information with? How are we going to know what the issue is with them? And how are we going to help that incarcerated person on their journey? So now that forensic psychiatrist, because there was one case where the psychiatrist left and didn't talk to anybody, and then we'll complete a report. A report in 2 weeks is not good enough for us. We need that immediately. So now they are no longer allowed to leave our facility until they brief our mental health staff on what are the issues with this individual person, what is the program they're going to be on, what do they need, should they go to jail-based competency, should they be in PSU, is Department of State Hospitals going to take them anytime soon? So that is happening now. We've also, we placed an incarcerated person on conservatorship about a month ago. Hadn't done that in many, many, many years. It's not a fix-all tool, but it is something that we can use when this incarcerated person, when there's no one else that can speak for this person, when the person himself or herself cannot speak for themselves because they're just mentally incapacitated, or they don't understand the system, or they're scared. So with those people, and oftentimes those are the ones who might not want to eat, or they might not want to drink, or they won't engage, they're not taking a shower, they're not taking care of themselves, and we don't want to use force to do any of that. We want to do what we need to do for that individual. So we have worked with the county on saying, hey, we're the sheriff's department, hey, you're the county. Conservatorship is a thing. Let's work on making that something that it doesn't take months and someone is decompensating while it's happening. So they have started, we have made inroads with the conservatorship also of the county, and that's something we can look to when we need it. As I said, not a fix-all, not a fast fix. It doesn't mean they're going to start eating and drinking. It just means there's someone who's going to be there for that person if they have nobody. Next slide. Also in mental health, we are currently working on EASS, which is Early Access and Stabilization Services. So the San Diego County Sheriff's Department has had a jail-based competency program for many years. We currently have 30 incarcerated persons in there who program to restore their competency. Our population of IST incompetent to stand trial has tripled in the recent years, tripled. And PSUs can't accommodate everybody, whether it's the county one or the one that we have in-house at Las Colinas or San Diego Central Jail. And essentially they wait, and they wait in jail, which is not really probably the place they should be. But where else are you going to put them when they're waiting to stand trial for a serious crime? So there is a contract that's being worked out right now with Department of State Hospitals, because the Department of State Hospitals is also very impacted. They're really trying to push a lot of that down to counties again, very similar to realignment that we saw with state prisons. But they said, hey, we will come, we will help pay for these programs for EASS, so you can start on that before they are sent to DSH. So we're working on the final parts of that contract. And if you look at the numbers, there's 86 individuals right now that we could touch in positive ways through EASS, rather than having to wait for JBCT or Department of State Hospitals. So this is a program where I'm really excited about starting, and I'm hoping they work through all their contractual issues, because it's between Department of State Hospitals and the outside vendor. It's not a contract with the Sheriff's Department. So that's a new thing that we're bringing in for our mental health. Next slide. This is something I shared. I was asked to present to BHAB a couple weeks ago. And I actually created, well, I didn't create it. My staff created it. I told them to create it, this thing. So my staff did a wonderful job on this. And it's basically a flow chart of how our mental health system works in the jail, from booking to intake, from refusals to when they get in mainline. If they go to mainline and they have mental health issues, where they go, how they process through. And I think this really gives everybody an idea of how complex the situation and the process is, but how we have something in a positive thing for everybody, every part of the process. It's not just intake, it's in housing, it's upon their release, it's when they're in the sobering cell. So I can send this to you guys. You can take a look at it. I think it answers a lot of questions. I think BHAB liked it. But this is kind of a process, and I think it answers a lot of questions, and everything in there is stuff you guys should know. It's stuff the community should know. There's no secrets in that diagram, period, at all. Next slide. And so I'm going to close with just some completed and current projects and future projects. So as you know, we centralized our mail processing unit for increased efficiency and security. So all of the mail will go to our Las Colinas facility. We have a mail processing team who that's what they do. They look for drugs, they look for contraband. They use all the equipment that we have. They use our TrueNarc to test it. I know there's been recommendations about scanning mail, and that would save a lot of lives. While I don't disagree, I just have one more slide. I literally have this one and one more and we're done.
Technology is great when it works. When it doesn't work, it's not so great. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I think we're back. Let's give it a try. Thank you.
And so San Diego Central Jail will start in a couple weeks. It will probably take 4 months to onboard all of our cameras at the jail. So, within the next 18 months, we should have body worn cameras on everybody in all of our facilities, which is a great thing. Biometric, we have a biometric pilot at San Diego Central Jail. Essentially, it's an ankle bracelet or a wrist. We've kind of moved to wrist because it's a little less clunky. It's a voluntary program. We've worked through a lot of the bugs on that program. We're still trying to figure out if it's something that we like and it's something that is benefiting our population. So it will set alarms when there's a uptick or a downtick in pulse, breathing habits, that type of thing. It's, like I said, all voluntary, so it may or may not work for us, but we're still assessing that right now. I just wanted to give you an update. And then we will be finalizing construction at Rock Mountain Detention Facility. Our House 1 will be open. They just told me in June, so I'm very excited about that. So what that means is I can start moving population into our Rock Mountain and start doing much needed construction and rehab on George Bailey Detention Facility, which is a very aging facility, and making it, just safer, nicer, better to program in. And so working on that. Next slide. This is the last slide. Our future projects, I just wanted to leave you with a little taste of what we're working on right now, moving forward. So as I alluded to, we're starting our renovations at George Bailey Detention Facility. That will take about 4 to 5 months. I have started the plan of all triple bunks. So it's quite a process. We're going to start with George Bailey. Triple bunks remove quite a lot of beds. So when George Bailey is done, we could lose up to 500 beds. And we'll have to work with the BSCC on what that looks like in terms of our overall population and our cap. So that's something in the works, but triple bunks are high and triple bunks aren't good. And triple bunks need to go because I just have seen too many incidents where, they're climbing up there and there's no carpet. So we're moving the triple bunks out. It's a stage process, so I can't do it overnight. I have to do it safely and staged because I can't displace my population. So we've also are in the midst of the creation of an ADA, American with Disabilities Act unit. This is something I think that has been recommended many times over the years. I know prior sheriffs wanted to do it. Essentially, I've looked at my staffing and I said, what can I convert? And I converted staffing to make an ADA unit because I knew I was going to get more staffing. So we're making do with what we have. And that unit will be comprised of sworn staff, medical staff, a compliance manager, and a project manager, because you need all components. It's not just sworn staff. You need the medical the nurse, the doctor. I need the compliance manager who's up to date with all the laws. And I need a project manager who knows how to bring this stuff into the facility and make infrastructure decisions for mobility issues, hearing issues, vision issues. So that's all happening very soon. Where I talked about a CCJ body worn cameras, and we are in the very, very early stages of the implementation of our RFID pilot project. It's basically a really fancy word for we can scan stuff, and it's good tracking and getting rid of the old, 1990s handwritten logs. It's RFID, and we'll scan, and it will help with documentation. It will help with who's who, where are they? And so we're working on that moving forward. I know I talked for about a full 30 minutes. I know there's a lot to digest. I'm very pleased with all the improvements and the hard work of my deputies and my medical staff and my food staff. I mean, they have been working very hard to implement these changes. I recognize that we have the lives of loved ones in our hands every single day. That is not lost on me, to say the least. It is not lost on my staff. Are there things that have been not done or things that are done that I think we could have done better? Absolutely. 100% absolutely. And I have great sympathy for the loss of all the families out there. You know, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a sister. I understand, I get it. And I know they may not want to hear it from me, but I care about the people that are in this facility. And the things that we're doing are for the betterment of that population. And we will continue moving forward, and we will continue hitting all those challenges. And when we make mistakes, we expect to be told that you made a mistake, and we're going to own it, and we're going to move on, and we're going to fix it. And that's really why I'm here today, because I appreciate the support, and I want to make sure that we are all on the same page on what's going on in our facilities. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. There's so much going on. If it's okay, we have some members of the public that would like to ask you some questions. Three requests to speak. I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Paul. And then, no, please stay. And then also some of the CLERB members may want to ask you questions. Thank you very much. Very comprehensive. Appreciate it.
Okay, at this point, we have 3 requests to speak on this item. So we'll go to AC Mills. AC Mills.
Okay, can you hear him? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, my name is AC Mills, and my son Kevin Mills died in November 11th, 2020, found unconscious in his cell. He was a mental individual that had a history in San Diego, been to Patton, once been in many mental institutions, but when he was down in the jail, they didn't identify him. They didn't know him. They gave him the wrong birth date. That's the one question I want to ask. Why would they give him the wrong birth date after I told him the right birth date? And they still have not changed it. And they also, I got a documentation about, you're talking about being transferred from the jail to a proper mental institution. And there was a decision made by one of the judges in El Cajon that Kevin Mills should be removed from the downtown city jail and sent back to Patton, which indicate they knew about him, but obviously the people in the jail didn't know about him because they had gave him the wrong birth date. Okay, and my question is, that judge ruled in September of 2020 that Kevin Mills needed to be removed from the city jail and transferred back to Patton. And it never happened. I asked that question. I was wondering why. And then a couple of months later, in November the 11th at 2:30 in the morning, he's found dead in his cell. And those questions have never been answered. Why was it taking him so long to transfer it? Why was he still dead in the jail? And some of the things that you mentioned that you're going to shore up is some of the things that affected him. And that was my question. Why, and also why wouldn't his probation, his public defender in December, when asked about him, didn't even know he was dead in November. So where's the coordination between the jail and the court system when they make a decision? That's my question about Kevin.
I'm so sorry
Did you
to
hear
hear
me?
about your son.
Did you hear me?
At this point, we really can't get into personal details on, if you want to answer any at all, but I don't think that there's enough details right now for you to give him a really comprehensive answer.
Yeah, I would agree. I do very much. I feel sorry for your loss. I really do. My condolences to you. I wish I knew the answers to that specific situation. But if maybe you sent it to the CLERB board and maybe they could send it to me and we can try to answer some of those questions, just to maybe as simple as the birth date thing. We could try. I can't promise you at this point what I can share, but if you want to push it forward, I'm happy to look at it. And I'm sorry, I can't answer that right now. I'm not trying to ignore the question. I just want to make sure the information you get is accurate.
Thank you.
And to be very clear for the future speakers that the assistant sheriff, this is public comment. The assistant sheriff does not have to answer any questions if she cannot or chooses not to. This is public comment, which each person gets 3 minutes to put their thoughts on the record. So next we will go to Miss Sean M. Miss Sean M. Ms. Sean M., are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, I'm the sister of Kevin Mills. And I heard your presentation on the Milton, how you're gonna, how could you say, you're reforming how you treat the mental illness in jail. It's 3 years too late for me. My brother, what you said about being dirty, he was locked up in a cell by himself. Again, like my dad said, he was supposed to be sent to Patton, but he wasn't sent. He had swollen legs. He asked to see the doctor. They refused. So what you're offering us is 3 years too late for me. I lost my brother. Everything that you're saying you're changing it's going to help some other person. Maybe if you are changing it, I appreciate that, because there's a lot of loved ones that I do not want to feel like I do. But the question, like my dad said, why was he sent to Patton? Why wasn't he given a bath? Like you said, you're going to worry about if they're dirty. He had a mental breakdown. There was no one in there to treat him. I meant to go see him. They asked me what was wrong with him. I let them know that he was a schizophrenic and he was in a mental break. When I went to visit him, I even told him, I said, why don't you guys send him? Can you send him somewhere else? I have not seen my brother this way. And then like my dad said, I got a call from him right after he got the call. I hear my mother's cry. That was the worst thing I can ever say, I can ever hear. And again, he was denied going to the doctor. And matter of fact, the doctor went to go see him. But again, like my dad said, due to the wrong birthday, they wasn't able to see him. And now I lost my brother November 11th, 2020. So again, you're saying everything that you said was exactly what you're saying to help prevent this mental people that goes in incarceration. That was my brother. And that's what I wanted you to know. That was Kevin Mills. Exactly what you described, what you're changing. But again, like I said, it's 3 years too late for my brother.
Thank you for sharing. And I know I can't take away your pain, but I know I can move forward and move the department in the right direction.
Next, we will go to, let's do Yusef Miller. Mr. Miller.
Good evening. My name is Yusef Miller. I'm with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition. And all of the reforms that we've heard nothing about scanning the deputies and staff, not that I was aware of. We were cutting in and out. So if I'm wrong, then please clarify. This small issue of having complete contact. This issue was a no-brainer for Arizona. You can look at the Arizona paper about fentanyl and drugs getting into the jails. The sheriff there saw fit to scan everyone that was going inside the jail. So we talk about how we care about the families and the loss of life in custody, but this step is a step too far. I think we need to rethink our values and make sure that we put them in the right perspective so that we can protect and prevent other lives being lost. This is a step that I think is crucial. We hear too much that there's not enough data supporting scanning the staff and deputies. But in January, we had a deputy arrested with a drug related to his case. And in February, we had another deputy arrested with drugs related to his case. In March, I believe it was, that we have officers who are drunken in public we have a crisis and we need to make sure that we treat it as such. And by as such, I mean 100% contact with everyone going in and out of the jails. So with all this reform, great. We've been asking for that kind of reform for years. Okay, we have it. What about this step that we think is the missing piece to make sure that we have a complete comprehensive approach to banning drugs from entering the jails to the best of our abilities? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Miller. In actuality, I am looking at options of searching. It's very early stages. I'm not ready to share that. We're looking at the options that we have before us. I am actually doing some of that. I am using canines in our facilities. We are searching people that are coming in. It's not consistent right now in terms of the program that you're referring to, like with Arizona, but it's definitely something we are looking at. It takes a lot more than just overnight making a policy and it starts on Tuesday. There's a lot that I have to look at. There's a lot I have to look at on the legal side. There's a lot I have to speak with my sheriff. So definitely, I don't want you to think that we're not considering that. We 100% are considering that. And what that will look like remains to be seen. It could be a hybrid type of situation. And I'll leave it at that. And I hope that you have faith in me and my staff that when I say that I'm going to do something, we're doing it. And then when I say I'm going to come back and tell you what we're doing, I'm going to do that. So thank you for your comments. And
Thank you.
concern.
Thank you, Assistant Sheriff. We have one more member of the public and then we'll go to the clerk board. Thank you.
Assistant Sheriff, we actually have three more
Oh, three more.
requests to speak.
Okay.
At this point, we'll go to Sabrina Weddle. Sabrina Weddle, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Hello, my name is Sabrina Weddle. I am the older sister of Saxon Rodriguez. I just asked that when it is my 3 minutes, if you can give me a warning, as I was very patient during the slide. Unfortunately, we missed half of it, who is via Zoom, and we did get blacked out for a second. So if I missed anything in my comments, but I want to start with the wellness checks. I do believe that was about case number 21069, which is my little brother, Saxon Rodriguez. Saxon died July 20th, 2021. I do remember you saying you've only been in your position for about a year. My brother died from a fentanyl overdose. Unfortunately, the deputies that were in charge of him that day for his wellness checks checked him at 65 minutes instead of 60. And that 5 minutes, he could have been revived, but unfortunately he is gone. Yesterday, we celebrated one of his anniversaries. In 4 months, it will be 2 years. I want to say I'm really glad that these checks have been happening for a year. Unfortunately, like I said, my brother has been gone for 2 years. And it's unfortunate. You stated that you're a mom. I am a single mother. It's dinner time. I've been on these CLERB meetings for quite some time. And, again, I want to state thank you for doing this. I wish that Kelly Martinez was present herself, as she has been making families a number of promises. I want to state there can be a better set of eyes that does the work that you're doing, and it would start by somebody that's not in law enforcement. And as far as scanning the employees, just like Yusuf stated, that needs to be handled. I heard you stating that we scan the people that come into your custody. My brother was scanned. He was placed in custody for 4 days and he received drugs. He received fentanyl and methamphetamine, which he died off. And then in the sheriff's report that we received, there was also another substance that was in his cell. So within 4 days of him being in there, not only did he die off fentanyl and methamphetamine, but there was a whole nother drug that was in his cell. And then I heard you stated you're trying to get rid of the three bunks because there's no carpet on the bottom.
Sabrina, you have 30 seconds.
We want change, and I'm going to continue to be here until the deputies are scanned. The deputies are the ones bringing the drugs in. I hope that the K9 is being used every time they clock in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Paloma Cerna. Ms. Cerna?
Hi, yes.
I like to thank the members of the CLERB and also to I thank you for giving me this chance to speak. So also to my daughter, Elisa Serna, died November 11th of 2019. You know, it's great to hear these things, you know, tickle my ears, you know, but there's no chance that these changes, if there is, changes will ever bring my daughter back. But if there is truly change, it will stop from other loved ones from dying and from putting other families in pain, in torture, nightmares. You know, it's crazy, you know, that we have us impacted family, we have to continue to fight to get answers. My daughter was 8 weeks pregnant. She was left in a cell for 5 days with no food. There's nothing documented that she even ate. All she was given was paper cups for water, in which she was throwing up even that, because the deputies and the medical staff refused to give her her medication. Even the judge had ordered the jail to take her to be seen with the doctor, and they never did. There's videos of her for 5 days in which we have seen, and it is awful to see how your child is being treated just because she has a drug problem. As a mother, it is awful to see how these people will treat your child. We need justice right now, not only for the future, God forbid, but also for us too. We still need answers. Things will change when deputies are starting to be held accountable for their own actions. They cannot continue to run and blame others for why they did not step in and help a human being, our loved ones. Deputies need to be checked and scanned because they are part of the factors. It's not just the inmates. It's been going around for years throughout the state of California that deputies are bringing drugs into the jails. And it's been, I mean, everyone knows how awful deputies treat inmates. There's a genocide.
Unfortunately, Ms. Cerna, your time has expired. Next, we'll go to Gilbert Gill's daughter, Jennifer Schmidt.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm Jennifer Schmidt, Gilbert Gill's daughter. I was not going to speak, but I only have one thing to say. I heard after Mr. Mills spoke, the deputy or the sheriff that's there said what information I can give you. Why can the families not get the video of their loved ones if the sheriff didn't do anything wrong? And even if they did, why don't you let us see it so we don't sit in torment while you guys decide to like lollygag and cover things up? Why don't we get to see the videos immediately? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And at this point, it looks as if we have one more request to speak, and it will be Michael Cerna. Mr. Cerna.
Yes, I also want to speak, continue on with what my wife said, but I want to echo what the Mills family has said. Why now, when this has been going on for years and years and years, underneath the old sheriff, who the current sheriff was a part of that whole chain of command, why should we sit and listen today and say, oh, they're promising all these things, when for years people have been dying, families have been suffering, individuals going to this county jail system, and before they're even able to be arraigned, they're dying. because of neglect, because of negligence. Why now? Just because of the spotlight that is on you now? Why has it taken so long? Why haven't you rectified these problems years ago? I happened to find out about all of the deaths as me and my wife were driving down to take care of the remains of my daughter, about all the other individuals that had died before my daughter. And then to only get ran around by the sheriff's department, one story after another, and none of them even lining up. This is little too late. Here recently, that Kelly Martinez spoke and said how, because of COVID, her deputies were going through all kinds of things. But through COVID and through quarantines, all of us families were sitting at home with the ache and pain in our hearts and in our lives and the absences of our loved ones. We had to form a group amongst each other just to help each other, support each other, encourage one another, to let them know that, they're not alone in this. We want justice now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cerna. Assistant Sheriff Adams Hodder, we have 2 more requests to speak. David Settles.
Yes, hello. Yeah, my name is David Settles. I'd just like to say my brother, Matthew Settles, died in custody at George Bailey this past August. My brother did have schizophrenia. What I'd like to know, you spoke of your conservator program. I do want to say, my brother was under a conservatorship. He was in the county mental hospital, getting treatment, stabilizing, when he had a subpoena and went to jail. And what was, very frustrating, everybody in the system agreed he should not have been in the jail. I know he was on the waiting list to go to state hospital. We were very worried for him. My mom was always trying to reach out to him in the jail. It was very frustrating, trying to interact with him. And he was, what we don't understand is he was in the situation transferred from the downtown to George Bailey. Nobody notified us, or our conservatorship did not notify us. My mom had to find that out indirectly. For a month, we had no contact with him, and until we were informed that he died in solitary confinement. And all we know is he was assaulted while he was there. He was not protected. He had lacerations on the back of his head. And to this date, we still don't know what he went through all alone for that month. And so, I applaud what you're doing, but just this last August, he should have been protected and stabilized. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, John Settles. John Settles, are you there?
Hi, there we go. I was waiting for the unmute button. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for the work you are doing to improve the system, which is obviously broken. For the record, I'm David's brother and Matthew's brother who passed in custody, like he discussed. There's a lot of issues that while it's nice to hear that they're attempting to be addressed, the record of the sheriff's department stands for itself. And, up until this point, they've broken the record on how many deaths there are in custody. So while you can hear, there's a lot of people here who have suffered at the hands of the sheriff's department. So it's very nice to hear good words, and we are hoping that there will be some change. But even at this point, like I say, the record stands for itself. My brother, Matthew, was attacked in custody by a deputy. He had his skull broken. He actually had to have surgery. I think really what it comes back around to for me is I hear, I believe it was Ms. Hyder say, she's all about transparency, but we as families do not get transparency. In fact, even the CLERB does not get transparency because the CLERB cannot begin their investigation until the sheriffs have already completed theirs. I, as a citizen, do not have confidence in a system that says that it's transparent, yet we don't get the information from the sheriff's department until it's months or even longer, and they've done their investigation, they've put their reports, they've aligned all the reports. We should see the reports that were filed during the days when things happened right away, and I don't know why we wait for all that stuff. Anyway, for me, like I say, as a citizen and someone who's lost my brother to the sheriff's department, like what I see is that the record stands for itself. Let's hope we're moving towards a better paradigm, but even so, this transparency is something I hope we can focus on, because up until this point, I don't think we feel that, like, we even had a liaison with the sheriff's department, and he'd never even been to George Bailey. He didn't have one clue of what was going on, but he was supposed to be our liaison with the sheriff's department. I would like to see things like those change. So I'm hoping that you're pushing in the right direction, but up till now, forgive us that we have not seen that change. The sheriff's department has broken the record for deaths in custody. And, I appreciate the time here to speak, and I appreciate all the work you all are doing. Let's hope we can improve. Thanks so much.
And thank you. Chair, there are no other requests to speak.
Thank you. And now we'll go to CLERB members. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Bonnie, Ms. Kank.
Thank you. You mentioned about scanning the mail, and the reason you're not scanning it is because you want the incarcerated person wants to get the mail, and they want to smell the perfume, and they want to see the kisses. How is scanning the mail taking that away? I don't understand that.
If we scan the mail, if this was the card that you sent and we scan it, we're just printing out a piece of paper. And then they would get a piece of paper.
Why can't
not
you
the
just-
actual card?
Why can't you just scan the mail, the actual mail, and not print it out?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're referring to.
I think what she's saying is scanning it, making sure that there isn't any drugs or I think you do that.
We do that.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
And then she's,
kinds of
yeah,
scanning.
different kinds.
Okay,
So we have light that we will use. We have TrueNarc devices where we can test the product if there's like a discoloration or something that it's not feeling right. They can scan it for the illegal substances. Scan is, some people may want to take the card or the letter and digitally scan it, save it as a whatever, JPEG, and then print it and give the incarcerated person just a scanned piece of paper.
okay, I agree with you that would not be a good thing, but I didn't understand.
Misuse of scan.
Now I do. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's scan and print and then scan.
Yeah.
So, all right. Mr. Ware, you had your hand up.
Assistant Sheriff Hyder, thank you very much for that great presentation, very thorough. And I've known you for years as a professional, and I've always known you to be upstanding and transparent. And I definitely appreciate that. And I know that it's going to happen. I know we're going in the right direction, and I appreciate that. Our condolences all obviously to those who have lost loved ones. The questions I have is, you've mentioned in your presentation a lot about team, the multidisciplinary team that you put together. That's great. The part I have is that you have medical staff that are part of that team, but they don't share the same accountability. We don't have jurisdiction to be able to hold them accountable. And I firmly believe that accountability makes people better. And so until we can get that piece settled, but also the widespread facility scanning, all the great work you're doing is great, but we're still going to have those pieces missing. So I always like to see us to really look at that piece, and you mentioned that you're doing that's open. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but the medical staff piece accountability that we do not have for them right now. That's a big time piece missing, and we need to get that in place. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Pastor Spriggs.
Yes, hi. If someone has a food allergy, how is that addressed?
So if there's a food allergy that they present with at the time that they come in, it will be documented, and there's certain diets they can get if it's a nut allergy or gluten, or even if it's a religious diet too. So there's the option for them to get that sort of diet. There's liquid diets. If it's something that presents later on where they start having a reaction to food, and then they go to medical, or we notice something, and hopefully that's something they're gonna say, hey, I need to go to sick call. I'm having some reaction. Or if it's someone that isn't able to speak for themselves, it's something we're noticing, through a wellness check. Then they'll go to the doctor, do a sick call, and hopefully be diagnosed with the allergy. Hopefully we catch those. Allergies are very serious, especially if it's nuts or seafood. So we do our best to find those. So there is a process in place. Yes.
Thank you. Dragon. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, my name is Ariana Federico Mondragon. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was a lot of great information, good information. Question that I had, I think a couple of times you mentioned that they were like pilot programs. So pilot programs a lot of the times have like deadlines or an end date, right? Could you share a little bit more about where you're at with that? How this becomes more of a thing that's more permanent, more sustainable? I think my concern is that, at times when you have pilot programs, you don't have enough staffing, enough funding, budgeting allocations, overload, burnout of employees themselves. So I think I would be interested in hearing more about that. And if you could also share a little bit more, when you work with the different departments or all these layers of like staffing, medical, psychiatric, that's all like caseload. So how quickly is that collaboration coming through? I think we were hearing about folks that didn't have a response, or there wasn't really an answer as to why the care wasn't being done at a specific time or too late, right? I think that could be more helpful to learn more about.
So to your question on pilots, great comment. Pilot is just a startup, and for the wellness checks, those are longer a pilot. Those are mandatory checks. That is in our everyday operations. So pilot was the first one, and pilot should be removed from that vocabulary for wellness checks. That is what we do every day. So that is in place and will continue, and it's documented. Pilot for the biometrics is still very much a pilot, and we will assess whether it's something that is really to the benefit of our population. And if it's not, and we deem that it's too much effort, or it's not enough to keep the incarcerated population safe, then it's not worth the time and staff and money and budgetary constraints that we have, because as you said, we're using what we have to do what we need to do. Because like every other entity, none of us are getting a lot of more money or any new staffing. So the pilot program for the body worn camera is now, that was the pilot program. Now, as we move to San Diego jail, it's the program. So it's the way that we will be doing things moving forward. And that's all in policy and procedures in terms of how we operate the body worn cameras, when it's going to be on, when it's going to be off, how we document things, how we share the information. So that's all working its way into policy. With respect to the sharing of information, were you meaning amongst the unique groups within the facilities or with the community, or both? Okay. So the the multidisciplinary groups meet every week. And so they have that, basically go through their caseload and share all that information and have a plan. And then the next week they discuss, how did that plan go? Do we need to alter it? Do we need to change it? Was it successful? Do we need to try another way? So those happen every week, and that's where that information is shared. As to the sharing of information with the community on questions related to care, I think is what you referred to. I wished I could share everything that we could share, but unfortunately, there are legal constraints for me when there's an active investigation. Uh, I understand how hard it is not to have information. I understand that. They may not believe me when I'm saying that, but I 100% do. I want families to have closure. I want them to understand what the situation was. I don't want them to just sit there and wonder and or make something up, or I want them to know. But I can't share everything because of legal constraints. And when the investigation is done, when the medical examiner is done, when the case itself is done, then there's a time where that can be shared, and that's done through our lawyer. And it's not my position to share that information right now. And I understand it hurts. And I understand it's not something that people want to hear. And I also want to make sure our family liaison program actually works. I don't want people to have a liaison that they don't feel is doing them any good. So those are things that I'm going to look at. I'm hearing everything they're saying. This is not falling on deaf ears. So to the sharing part, I guess I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Dr. Brown. GI Wilson? Mr. Wilson?
Go ahead.
I would say, have you considered other ways the community could be more involved in the operations down there to sort of like supplement some of the work you're doing, or just to be that ear or something like an additional, not an additional layer of liaison, but something of that nature where the community could be more helpful to you all in the operations of the jail? Have you ever considered something like that?
I wish I could hire them all, but obviously, there are constraints on that. I do want the community to feel that their voice is heard in what's happening in our facilities. Obviously, there's certain roles and functions that only deputy sheriffs or medical professionals or whoever can do. And then I think from the approach in terms of just trying to share the information that we're doing, the programs that we're doing, talking with BHAB, talking to members in the community. There are people who call me often and I work with them. There are several people, and if they're on the call, they probably know who they are, who call me and they'll say, hey, this is going on, or I heard this. And I do my best to help work them through the situation and get a resolution to what's going on, or say, hey, this is what you need to do to work through that problem, or hey, this is why that's happening, or hey, that isn't even true, because that happens too. So I do have some of those community members who are calling me. So I appreciate that, because it's important for me to have my ear to the people and know what's going on, and know there are good ideas that are coming. They just don't come from inside. They're going to come from the community too. And it's important that they're there. So I think just making sure that I'm out there, in the detentions bureau, I feel like I'm a little more hidden compared to when I was in the law enforcement side. You're out in the community more. And just because I'm now in that bureau doesn't mean that has to change. And so to me, I think that's what I'm trying to do. And if there are things that I can think of later on, I'd be more than happy to say, hey, this is where I could use a helping hand.
Okay, please do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Good evening, Assistant Sheriff. I applaud the trajectory that you've started at the jail. I have a couple of questions that deal with personnel and money. Without people and without money, no matter what you do, you can either sustain or keep that trajectory going. How many people are you short in the detention bureau?
I don't have the exact number right now, but with the Rock Mountain coming on board, which we would have to staff, and then just regular vacancies, I think I'm up close to 300, high 200s. But while I recognize staffing is definitely a need, it's not an excuse. We still have to do what we need to do. And while it's harder and more of a challenge, saying staffing is an issue, while it's it's true as a statement and it's factual. I can show you I'm down this many positions. We still have a job to do.
Yeah.
And
And I
so
think,
I'm still trying to find those ways to work with those, and still not burn out the staff I have. It's this balance that keeps going on. And so that's what keeps me up at night.
Right.
Making
well,
sure
being
that's
short 200 or 300 people means that you have to rob Peter to pay Paul.
That is
And
true.
if you're going to make changes, you have to cut something somewhere to make that change. That leads me into my second question, and I have a third. Mandatory overtime. Are your people doing mandatory overtime?
They are, they're now moved. They were at 2 days. I moved them down to 1 day. And the department as a whole is doing mandatory overtime, 1 shift every pay period. So there's a more of a sharing of the overtime rather than burning out staff who's in the jail over and over again. That cannot be maintained for a long time. So it's something that we changed. We monitor it all the time, and we're making sure that there isn't burnout. We're making sure people aren't working too much, because that's not going to work out. And our law enforcement partners, our court service partners are helping us in that endeavor. And so it's a constant effort of looking at numbers and crunching numbers and how's it going? And our Human Resources Bureau is tumbling over backwards to try to recruit and retain people. So like I said, the department as a whole is moving towards and recognizes, not only to keep our jail safe, but keep our community safe for deputies in the street. So, it's a national problem. It's not unique to San Diego, and we're facing it in every way we can. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I say I have 1 million people short. If I have a loved one that's dying in the jail and I have a family that's upset, I have to be accountable to that.
And finally, my last question deals with cost. If you have body worn cameras and you're fielding them to everybody else in the detention bureau, there's costs associated with that. Storing that video is expensive. Some of the things that you mentioned, the biometric devices, the RFID, all that costs money not only to acquire but maintain. Is that money showing up? Is it there for you to invest in improving the infrastructure? I know that's a loaded question, but
no one's going to turn down more money. That would be foolish. But, the Board of Supervisors has been very supportive of us over the last few years. So, we are making do with what we have. And, as there's funding out there, there's grants, you have to make sure the grant is worth what you're going to be getting into. And so we look at creative ways to fund that. And, there's always things sometimes, hey, we've been doing this for so many years. Hey, this hasn't really been working. Why are we still doing that? Maybe we need to divert resources, time, and sweat, blood, and tears to this program, which seems to be working, and get rid of that. And so it takes a lot of change and reassessment. And sometimes that's scary, especially in government, change is, scary thing. But I think we've changed that. And I think we're open to a lot of new things, as you have seen. And I have creative staff, and they're doing a great job, and they're making it work. So I appreciate all the support. And like I said, I'll never say no to money, but I also have to be reasonable that there's a lot of people out there that need money, not just the Sheriff's Department.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Can
I understand your uphill battle. It seems quite extraneous, and I applaud you for making the attempts and going through and for recognizing the families. I want to go back to Mr. Yusef Miller's question, because it had to do with specifically the scanning of the sheriffs as they entered in. And it was good to hear that you are looking at implementing that. But I think the concern was that the response from the Sheriff's Department seemed aloof and seemed to not go into holding officers accountable. And while your programs up here were wonderful and seemed to combat the issue within the inmates, it still did not address holding the officers accountable. And I think if you truly want the public to understand and want to jump on board with the changes that the sheriffs are doing, we want to hear that there's accountability. Because as Mr. Ware said, accountability is how you keep people honest.
I don't disagree with your comments. And when Mr. Miller referred to that, and I said that we're looking at it, that included everybody, not just inmates and contractors and visitors. We're looking at all the options. So, but like I said, it's very early and we're very early in the process of looking at that. So when we have more information and we get somewhere, and then I'd be happy to come back and share what we kind of came up with on that one, 100%. And I agree, accountability. People aren't going to trust until they really see that we're doing the things that we say we're going to do. And I recognize that. Trust 101, 100% understand that.
Thank you. Vice Chair Pintar? Yeah. Yeah, but Vice Chair Pintar has, and then we'll go to.
Thank you, Assistant Sheriff Adams Hyder, for being here and spending so much of your time with us and listening and hearing the families. We are hearing from these families every month when we meet. I know that it's hard to hear, and it means a lot to them, I think, and to us that you're here to hear from them and to hear from us tonight. So really appreciate it. Also appreciated hearing about the wellness checks in particular. I can hear the frustration in the families that are calling in tonight that they wish this had been in place for their loved ones. And I know that we can't go backwards, but hopefully it does save lives going forward. So thank you for that in particular. I appreciate it. I want to shift gears a bit here and talk about two things that are important. One is in the last couple of months, we've reviewed cases. I won't go into specifics about any cases, but frequently we see cases where the video has not been retained, or we get the message says the video wasn't available, or it wasn't saved long enough. I have asked this many times, but I would like to know how we can fix the problem of video inside the facilities working. It would be good for you, for the department. It would be good for us as we're reviewing these cases. I know there are times when I read reports from our investigators and I feel one way, that maybe the sheriff was at fault or the deputy was at fault, and then I see the video and I feel differently. So I would like for you to address that. And the second piece of that is that the video retention policy does not seem to align with the amount of time that people are allowed to file a complaint. So there's a year from the time of the incident, I believe, until that's the time frame for someone to file a complaint to CLERB. But the video retention policy is 6 months. And it also doesn't seem to be consistent across facilities. And I don't know why that would be. So could you address that for us tonight?
Sure. And hopefully I don't misspeak because I don't know the details of every single camera system in the facilities. So to start off, our facilities are old, except for Las Colinas. And the video system that was either not put in place because it didn't have it when they were built, like in 1978 for Vista, or later on, they throw them up there and put cameras up there in facilities 10 or 15 years later. The technology has long since advanced. Look, we're in Teams meetings. So some of the facilities, I think, have systems where they only track for a certain amount of time and then they start recording over, unfortunately. And then other systems, the camera systems aren't to this caliber. I'll just leave it at that. I think you've seen the videos, so I don't need to preach to the choir. Part of our refresh of George Bailey is new video. It's something that's very needed in that facility. And then we'll be doing that throughout the other facilities as we upgrade and expand, because video is, it's you need it. I mean, that's why we have body worn cameras. So with body worn cameras, that also is also kind of taking a role for capturing things. But as we all know, and you've all seen, the camera is here, the camera falls off, the camera's pointing at the ceiling. Sometimes you just hear it. Sometimes it breaks.
But it's better than nothing.
But it's better than nothing. So we do recognize video is important, and the retention, honestly, and I apologize, I'd have to look at each of the different green sheets to see what the retention is on each of those video cameras. And it would be reasonable that the retention would meet the retention of of the actual video, that would be lovely. I think sometimes what's happened, there have also been technical glitches and people probably are like, yeah, right. But honestly, when we brought in a new system that is like a dashboard system, there was lack of compatibility with like Windows 10 or whatever. And so there were actually periods of time where video was not retained without anyone's knowledge. So, and those are technical issues that come to light after something happens and then investigation is started and you're like, no, really? So those are things that we're constantly looking at. And when that happens, we're like, okay, what are we doing to remedy it right now? What are we fixing? So when that does happen, we do look at it. And so sometimes it's, well, we're going to get a new system. We're not going to, you know what I mean? We're not going to place
Sure.
this because George Bailey is getting a new one. So we're trying to work through a lot of that. And it's my goal, and I know the sheriff's goal, to there will be video, not only body worn, but facility-wide video to capture the facility, because the picture's worth 1,000 words, 100%.
Similarly, we get cases frequently where they say the camera was just broken in that particular cell. And then when I asked we asked many times on this in our meetings, what is the process for inventorying them to make sure that in the response we received was something to the effect of, well, that's general services. It's not the sheriff's department, but somebody in the sheriff's department is responsible for making sure that those are operating, correct?
They should be going through and making sure that videos are displaying on your multiplex that you're looking at, that there's not just a black hole like that right there and you don't see anything. How do we fix it? Get general services. It's true, general services does fix it. We don't fix it. It's not our staff that do it, but we're the ones on the jails. We're the ones that are seeing the cameras. If that's broken, it needs to be fixed. Just like if the intercom isn't working, the intercom needs to be fixed. So those are things that we're going through, and that's part of kind of the well checks and consistently getting them to go through, check the cameras, check the buzzer.
And
do
the
right
intercoms was mentioned in the paper on Monday. Yeah. Can I ask one other question? Another issue that I have paid a lot of attention to since I've been on CLERB, as I were reviewing these cases, is excessive force. And frequently when our investigators do a great job, bring our reports to us, they say, technically they followed policy because the deputy felt threatened by the incarcerated person or someone in the community. And then as if I request and the body worn camera is available, body worn camera video is available and I watch it, it's very clear to me, at least it seems to me, that the deputy had opportunity to de-escalate and did not use that opportunity. And what should have been not a violent conflict turns into a violent conflict because there was no de-escalation. Can please talk to me about de-escalation training and tell me that you are going to be emphasizing that in our detention facilities, because not just for the well-being of the incarcerated persons. If we weren't in an open session, I could point to specific cases and I could do it at another time if that would be helpful. But not just for the incarcerated person, the deputy's safety, and for the county. I mean, the money that gets paid out in some of these cases could just so easily have been avoided, in my opinion. Can you talk to us about de-escalation and, I don't know, make a commitment to emphasizing it?
I could talk hours about de-escalation. Yes, we are using it in our jails. It's something that when we are looking at incidents, and I look at the uses of forces too and say, okay, how could we have done this differently? Is that the approach we wanted to take? This incarcerated person is clearly agitated. Would it have been better to come back in half an hour or do whatever? So we look at those, my commanders look at all of those, and we sit down with those, deputies and the sergeants, and we look at, okay, explain the process here. And, okay, yes, maybe you're in policy, but, is there a better way to do it? And at the same time, having been a deputy sheriff, having been out in the field, having worked the jails, having been in scuffles, having someone front me off, based on my own experience and training and what I've been through as a deputy sheriff and my size compared to if I'm going to go head to toe with Tim Ware over here, I'm going to say, okay, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to react based on my training and what I know I can do as a deputy sheriff? That all is going to come into play. And then also the human nature of a deputy sheriff, and then the human nature of whoever's the opposing. And it all happens so very quickly, and decisions are made so very quickly. However, we train to be that first line of defense for the community and in our facilities. So we have to constantly reinforce de-escalation. We have to continually enforce, the safer ways to deal with individuals in the field. And it's muscle memory, it's practice, it's training, it's constant exposure. It's constantly thinking of how I was trained as a deputy, constantly think of what if scenarios. How are you going to respond if this happens when you're driving in your car and you think about it? When I was a deputy in the jail, okay, what if you're walking and an incarcerated person jumps out and he starts to strangle you? What are you going to do? It's constant what if, it's constant training, it's constant programming for everybody involved. And de-escalation is important. We need to have it. It is work. It is happening in the jail. There are classes that they're taking. And then we do the what ifs after. And if someone's using force that's excessive, they will be held accountable. We have an administrative process for that. And whether it's a formal investigation or it's a sit down and you're going to get yelled at by a commander or an assistant sheriff, but nobody wants that. And then written documentation, that is happening. And on the law enforcement side too. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where force is part of the job, but we just need to make sure that force is within policy and within statute.
Thank you. And I want to say that I very much appreciate that sometimes it's necessary to protect the safety of our law enforcement officers. So that does not, I'm not overlooking that, but in cases where there is no threat, I would love for it to be more emphasized more. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, we have one last question from Mr. Ware.
Yes, I'd just like to follow up on my question. In my position, I work with our law enforcement agencies all around the county, including our deputy sheriffs every day. And so I know the quality of people we have out there, including our deputy sheriff. So whenever I hear someone make the statement of, we know our deputies are bringing the drugs into the jails, I cringe every time I hear that. And one of the ways to make that statement go away is what you're working on, and that is to have that widespread facility scanning. So whenever you make that decision to do that, can we have an update on that, on whatever the decision is and why you made that decision, please?
Absolutely. And, when people say deputies are bringing drugs in the jail, if it hurts your heart, you imagine what it does to mine. But obviously that's a perception that many people have. And, I work really hard to make sure that I know if there's intelligence that's happening, that we're acting on it and that I'm holding them accountable, because that won't be tolerated from anybody. And deputies are held to a much higher standard. And that coming into this job, and the sheriff won't tolerate that. I won't tolerate that. The individual that they keep referring to, I wish I could share a lot on that, but there's a lot that I think you would be pleased with. And I'll leave it at that in terms of how that happened. And it wasn't in the jail. And I always want to make that clear. It didn't make it into this jail. It didn't make it in any jail. And there's no deaths attributed or any overdose attributed to that specific person. But I'm not naive enough to know that deputies are not above the law either. No law enforcement is. And I don't want people to think that's ever going to happen. And we hold them to a high standard, and they're going to be held to the high standard regardless. And I like I said, nobody's going to believe me until they actually see what I'm doing, and then maybe they'll have a little more trust in what I'm saying today here. And I hope that happens 100%.
Again, thank you. If you could send Val or Mr. Parker your presentation tonight, we could put it as part of our minutes, that would be wonderful. Appreciate that. Retention video, if you could get it back to us with more information about that, that would be video retention. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Send me an email so I'll remember.
Yeah. I'd like to invite you back periodically to give us updates. I think that would be wonderful. I'm hopeful that the changes that you're making will keep another family from having to go through what these families have gone through. And again, appreciate everything that you're doing. And thank you very much for taking the time to be here tonight.
Thank you for your time and questions.
Helps to turn it on, doesn't it? Now we're going to go to the executive officers report. Mr. Parker?
And then, thank you, Chair Delaney. But before Assistant Sheriff Adams Hydar leaves, I wanted to hear this. I think, this is my second time being the executive officer of CLERB. Okay, I was here a couple of years ago, and now I've been here almost 2.5 years. The fact that you came here willingly, you were not asked to come here. This was your idea to come here and present this, and you were going to be here for 15 minutes, and you've been here almost 2 hours. I have not seen this kind of transparency from an assistant sheriff in my time here. So I think for what that's worth to anybody, whether it's the members of the board, to the members of the community specifically, I want to thank you. Okay, so thank you for your willingness to do what you just did. All right.
Yes.
So with that, the executive officer report for the month of February. So a couple of things. Now that the state of emergency has been lifted, our investigators, CLERB's investigators are now back in the office. They were working 100% teleworking full-time. They are now back in the office. Our fiscal 23-24 operational plan draft has been prepared, and it will be presented to CLERB at a future meeting. Pending the approval through the budgetary process, there's a detention facility inspector position that we believe we're going to be getting July 1st. That's critical for everything that you just heard Assistant Sheriff Adams Hydar saying. We now will hopefully have a position that can focus solely on the detention facility inspections that we have been allowed to do for 30 years, but have never done because we haven't had the staffing or the funding. And now that seems to be happening. We're obviously working, just real quick, with that new position, CLERB will now have 10 people, which is up, from 4 that we had a couple of years ago. And our budget will be $2 million, which is up from like the 600 or 700,000 it was several years ago. So I want to commend at this point the Finance and General Government Group, who we now work under, for all the work that they're doing to make this a relevant civilian oversight entity, and they need to be commended for that as well. We're obviously diligently working on our 2022 annual report. We were going to present it tonight, but we didn't want to take time away from Assistant Sheriff Adams Hydar. So we'll present that on April 11th and then subsequently present it to the Board of Supervisors on May the 4th. Earlier this month, I participated in a joint presentation with CLERB. I represented CLERB, whereas Division of Inspectional Services for the Sheriff's Department and their Internal Affairs Bureau made a joint presentation to their Detention Services Academy, their 62nd Detention Services Academy, to talk about the difference. There's 3 different things there, right? So to talk about that difference and our focus. Each investigator over the last month, each of the CLERB investigators have participated in at least one ride-along with Sheriff's Department personnel. And I think that they were each ride-along was eye-opening for each of the investigators. All CLERB staff members toured the Probation Department's Youth Transition Center. Our administrative analyst, Norris Hakak, and the county's communication team have developed CLERB's communication plan. It's a very extensive outreach, basically an outreach program that gets us in front of the community, something we have never done before. So Norris needs to be commended for that. We cannot launch that plan until we have a CLERB logo adopted, which we hope we can do tonight. Ms. Hakak also facilitated CLERB's participation in Engage San Diego outreach program or outreach platform and the creation of a Gov delivery account. Right now, anybody who's interested in what CLERB is doing, we send an email as part of some public distribution list. But our website's not going to have the ability to finally have people go onto the website and click on it and follow us and be able, once we do the social media component, but also to follow us and get regular updates, our newsletters that we're going to be putting out, our updates, all of these things. And that's specifically thanks to Ms. Akak. As far as our investigative workload, I'm not really going to go into it. I've given you attachments B, which is our workload for the month. It's interesting to me because in February, we did have 2 deaths in custody. We did. Over the last year, since the MOU between the Sheriff's Department and CLERB has been signed, I've been to many death scenes, but I can tell you that last month were the first ones. We all know 1 death is too many. I get it. But I can tell you for a while in 2022, it seemed like every week I was going to a scene where someone died. And I think related to what Assistant Sheriff Adams Hydar is saying, I haven't been nearly as much as I was before. And again, 1 is too much. I know that, but I think there's some good things happening, at least for the future. So with that, you can look at B and C. If any of the board members have questions about our workload, case status, I'm more than willing to answer those. But what I really want to get into, attachment D has some emails that we send out, and you folks can look at that yourselves. But what I want to talk about now are the attachments E through H, which are the policy recommendation responses that we have received from the Sheriff's Department. The Probation Department has 4 that are outstanding, and they have provided me an update on each of those. We anticipate each of those probation ones. Some of them are in front of county council right now. Some of them are just about to be drafted, and maybe 1 or 2 they're still working on, but we expect resolution from the Probation Department real soon. They're actively working on these recommendations. In reference to the policy recommendations responses from the Sheriff's Department, we heard Assistant Sheriff Adams Hydar talk about the digital scanning of non-legal mail. So we got a response from the Sheriff's Department. And I just want to correct something, and I wish she was still here. It said that in our recommendation, we failed to consider the importance or the adverse effects of removing that personal touch from someone. We did not fail to consider that. It's been a priority of mine specifically for 25 years and being a former death investigator. So we did not fail to contemplate that. We believed, and this board believed, that the reduced drugs from entering the facility, unfortunately, played a higher, was more important. So we addressed that in the letter that we sent. However, the Sheriff's Department responded and said that they believe, as you heard the Assistant Sheriff say tonight, that that's one of the reasons they don't want to do this. And then also there are some infrastructure concerns and whatnot. She basically answered why they're not going to do this at this point. They also indicated that we did not consider legal mail. We did consider legal mail, but unfortunately Title 15, there's nothing we can't recommend that they don't get their legal mail, that folks in custody can't get it. So that's why we couldn't address that. So the Sheriff's Department has talked about the legal mail and what comes in through the legal mail, which is substantial. So, and they also talked about all the steps that they've put in place to process, as you heard this evening. But at this time, this recommendation will not be implemented for the reasons cited. So attachment F. Attachment F was the policy recommendation that we made pertaining to Title 15 clearly, and the Sheriff's Department policy clearly says that folks will be visually, incarcerated persons will be visually observed within every 60 minutes. Visually, there's no question about that. The recommendation, what we had found was, and you heard a member of the public speak to this a little earlier, that there was someone, and it's in their public response, but obviously someone, it was over 60 minutes from the time they were last seen, checked on, and then checked on again. It's about 65 minutes. So we made the recommendation to follow Title 15 and follow the policy as written. And the Sheriff's Department response for this one is that they're going to continue, basically, they're looking at the start time. They're looking at the start time. So if the security check is started, if the check is started in the module or whatever within that hour, they contend that that is sufficient. I contend that it's not. I mean, it's not, but that's the response at this point. And so that's where we are with that. I don't have any other response other than they're not going to implement. They're going to continue doing the start within 60 minutes. So that's attachment F. Attachment G, we made 5 recommendations in reference to a specific person who died. And a lot of this, to Assistant Sheriff Adams Hydar's point, this is all about transparency, these recommendations that we made on this case. Transparency, notification to families in a timely fashion when their loved ones are transported to a hospital in not so good condition. They have implemented all 5 of the recommendations that CLERB made. And that's pretty substantial. And it needs to be acknowledged that that's what they've done. As far as attachment H, this has nothing to do with a death, but there was a lot of confusion about how, temporary and permanent handicap placards and whatnot. There was confusion out for the Law Enforcement Services Bureau on how to enforce certain things. Sheriff's Department, based on our recommendation, put together a training bulletin, conducted in-service training to clarify the issues so that this would not reoccur. So they implemented that recommendation and the training bulletin that went along with it. So they should be commended for their implementation of that. As far as those are the policy recommendation responses. As far as the sustained finding responses, as everyone knows, just to educate everyone, whenever we make a recommendation, whenever CLERB, the board, finds that there was a sustained finding, we write a letter to the department, whether it's a sheriff or probation department, and we say, this is what's happened. CLERB says sustained. We issue basically a draft, it's like a template, right? Because we are not privy to, we're not permitted to have discipline history given to us. So all we say in this letter to the respective department is, please use progressive discipline. The departments, to their credit, they don't have to respond to us. They do respond and say, yes, we have received this. It's been forwarded to the respective chain of command. I can tell you for attachment I, which was it was a shooting of someone who died by a deputy who was actually criminally charged in the shooting. The Sheriff's Department responded and laid out that that's exactly what happened. Obviously, we found during our recommendation, during our investigation, the Sheriff's Department, there were no other systemic issues in that case whatsoever. So the department acknowledged that, yes, this is what you recommended, and this situation has already been remedied because the person no longer works there. And then finally, in reference to that case we talked about, where it was 65 minutes and 23 seconds between the checks, the Sheriff's Department responded and said that this has been shared with the Detention Services Bureau command staff to determine if there's any appropriate administrative action on the part of folks who may or may not have done those checks in a timely fashion, including additional training and a referral to internal affairs. So that was the response. That's attachment J. And with that, that concludes my my second officer report.
Thank you. Are there any public comments?
There are 2 requests to speak.
Yeah, we'll turn that over to you then, Mr. Parker.
Paloma Cerna.
Hi, yes, thank you very much for letting me speak again. And so it's sad to say that I believe the officer that was speaking, doing the presentation did leave. She talks about video, talking about, how it's a video that will show what's really going on, the truth. My daughter, Lisa Cerna, there was video for 5 days, and there's so much truth into that. And once again, our court hearing is delayed till maybe sometime to June now, instead of the end of this month. But the jail with the videos, we were told there was no video, outside of the cell. But then I did find out that there is video for that. And also too, you talk about the checks, they're checking to see how the inmates are doing every hour. She, as soon as she, as a deputy and nurse, walk away and leave Elisa dying on the floor, a deputy or medical staff is walking by her door. You could see it. You could see their feet. So they know she's there. I mean, she's in a medical ward. So they also see her through their video screen, and they continue to ignore her and deny her any type of measure of life, of saving her at all. They just let her die. And it's so sad. You know, like I said, this deputy that was speaking there tonight, she just tickling the ears, but I really don't think there will be change. I mean, people been dying there for years, and it's sad, you know, because there is evidence, and she talks about the video about deputies will be held accountable, you know, that they would even get screened by their boss. That is not true, because Elisa was there for 5 days, had a seizure while the deputy was there to take her to the OBGYN and to the doctor. And she had a seizure, and a deputy grabbed her by the collar and drug her back into the cell, threw her on the bed, and left for an hour. Today, that deputy is no longer working there. Was she being prosecuted? Was she fired? We don't know. Was she able to retire like Gore and collect money? I don't know. But it's so sad that these deputies are not being held accountable with the videos. Even with the videos, there's no justice. I really do hope that things change.
I apologize, Ms. Cerna, your time has expired. Next, we'll go to Sabrina Weddle.
Hello. I just want to say thank you, Paul, for advocating for them to be checking. I just pray that there's change, Unfortunately, after Saxon, he was number 7 in 2021, and there was quite a bit of deaths after him. I just want to see change. I want to know that the deputies that aren't doing their job are held responsible. Unfortunately, the day that my brother died, those deputies got to clock in the next day. And did they do their job that day properly? We will never know, because they weren't held accountable. And I've said it time and time again. My mom works at a daycare, a school. If somebody died on her care, her watch, she's going to be held accountable. Just because it's a jail and they're inmates, they're humans. I've been on this Zoom since 5 o'clock. You guys have been in person, and I know that we're going to be able to be coming in public, and this meeting's just going to get longer and longer until we've seen change. And I've said this time and time again, and I'm just going to, they spent money, I just want to keep saying that I'm going to be here for my brother, Saxon Rodriguez, who was not checked on and on time. 65 minutes, 5 minutes could have saved his life. And I had to read that before Christmas. CLERB put that out December 15th, almost a week and a half before Christmas. I had to read that my brother could have been saved if they would have done their job on time. And I just pray that nobody else feels the pain that me and my mom feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I believe we have a request to speak from folks in the audience. Sarah Chavez?
Hello. Thank you for having me. Well, again, my name is Sarah, and I knew Alan A. I'm here on behalf of Alan's family, Brenda. I known him for 5 years. I met him through my nephew, who were there about the same age. I could tell that he was a good kid. He just wanted guidance and love. When I heard that he passed, it was hard for me to believe, especially because where he was in, the same place I've been once. How was it possible? How could they let him sleep for that long, realizing something was wrong? Whatever they changed from the time I was there to now should just stop and go back to how you guys were running it. I have kids of my own now. God forbid for any of my kids to enter that place and something happening to them. if they do, I want them to take care of them like if they were your kids. I don't want anyone else to go through what we went through. Went through with Alan. He was supposed to be released. He should have been home already with the family that loves him, that will care for him. I hope you guys can make the change that we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are so sorry.
One final request to speak would be Deidre McLeod. We were unable to connect earlier. Deidre McLeod, are you there? Deidre McLeod? Okay, and we do have one other request to speak, and I believe it's on the executive officer report. Leslie Crawford. Leslie Crawford,
Am I unmuted now?
you are. Your time starts now, ma'am.
I know, and it's late and I know you're tired, and I guess I just want to say that my son has only been gone for 6 months on April 5th, but my mind creates all kinds of images. I don't even want to think of how these families who have been waiting 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to get any real information about their loved ones. The longer the sheriff's department refuses to give any information out, and I understand they're investigating and I got to protect themselves, but it creates loved ones whose mind cannot, you just have to come up with your own ideas because you have nothing to fill the void. No excuses, no facts, no nothing. Duplicate stories, which only makes you doubt them more. I just think they need to figure out, I know they're short-staffed, but how to dribble out something to keep the loved ones at bay. Anyway, thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And it looks like we have an additional request to speak in Cheryl Canson. Cheryl Canson?
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Hi, I'm a family member and a collaborative partner with North County Equity and Justice Coalition. And I am so grateful for the conversations that are being had right here. And I have 2 sons inside suffering with mental illness. And I just want to educate you all that those and you allow them to not have a way to access help or self-advocate and notify someone that they're in crisis are crucial. It can mean the difference between life and death. And I just wish there was a more comprehensive way for people to notify people inside, maybe like a panic button or that 988 line accessible to prisoners to alert someone that they're in crisis. And I just wish we had a more comprehensive way to respond emergently to emergencies, because like I said, it can mean the difference between life and death, and those minutes are truly, truly crucial when a person is in crisis and no one's there listening, and they feel unsafe and feel unheard and just have no way to let no one know that they need help. So thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you for those comments. Now we'll go to board chairs report. Board members, just a reminder that your Form 700s are due by April 1. Please send them to the appropriate person. Number 2 is we are going to be doing some SNAP tours. Those are going to be held by the Sheriff's Department. Basically, they are a 1 day, if I understand correctly, a 1 day tour of all the facilities with questions answered. I'm sorry, the detention facilities. Will be, Mr. Parker will be arranging those with the Sheriff's Department. Let's see here. Don't forget that we do have a special meeting on March 28th. So please be reviewing all your the rules and regulation proposals. And finally, a little bit of good news here. I'd like to congratulate Paul, Mr. Parker, on getting the San Diego Society of Professional Journalists a Window Award for transparency. You can see right through them. Right through them. Okay, with that, our new business, we are going to adopt or hopefully adopt the new CLERB logo. I will turn it back over to Mr. Parker.
Okay, this was an item that was brought forward last month, and then it was continued to this month. So I'm not really going to go into all of the background. However, I will say that as you can see on the screen, let me just give you a brief background. One of the things, obviously we're a civilian oversight entity. And since I've been the executive officer, the last thing I've wanted was a badge on our logo. I didn't think it was appropriate because we're not law enforcement. When Norris Sakak got here as our administrative analyst, one of the things that she brought with her was her experience with the Office of Equity and Racial Justice and her numerous community connections and how the community might look at or view us. So she ran with the concept, of course, I gave her full authority to do so, of how can we come up with a logo that best represents what CLERB truly is, right? We're not an advocate for one side or another. We're an advocate for the facts, but we do involve the community. We do involve law enforcement. So I think, so she did this work. She convened several focus groups, and these were the 2 logos after numerous logos were kicked around that made the final cut to be presented to this board. Now, to be clear, one of the reasons why this board was not, we didn't ask your opinion. We didn't include you in this process because we were being consistent with what the county of San Diego does when it comes to what they're currently doing, a logo and a rebranding and all of these things. And the staff does the work. They do it all, and then they present it to the appointing authority or whatnot to make that final determination. For history, CLERB's current logo was created by an executive officer 25 years ago with no input from the board whatsoever. So we have evolved. We're getting away from the law enforcement component that shows that we are like a law enforcement entity, but also now you have staff members who have done the hard work, the heavy lift, the outreach to the community. And now we present it to you folks for hopefully a resolution, because once we can get a logo finalized, we can move forward with our communication plan, with our branding, with all the other, social media platforms, with everything else that we need to do to truly get the word out about CLERB. So before you turn it back over to you, thank you, Norris, for everything that you've done. And so with that, Chair Delaney.
Okay, again, thank you, Norris. Appreciate all your hard work you did. All right, so now as we kind of had a preview last month, we have Lady Liberty. For me, the scales of justice is something I've heard over and over by some of the members of the public. We want justice. So I'm just going to jump out there and say that I prefer that, but let's open it up and see what everybody else thinks. We can go around and discuss. We can raise our hands, however you guys want to do it. Mr. Ware.
Power to the people. The more people we have on there, civil government is supposed to respect and also represent the people.
Okay. Okay.
I like that too.
Bonnie likes that. Okay. Pastor Spriggs, you like that? Okay. Hot seat.
I like them both. I think that my preference is Lady Justice because I think that is our role here, is to ensure justice for everyone. And it also does have people in the background. So it's justice standing forward for the people. And so I would be happy with either, but my preference is the Lady Justice.
And just a suggestion, is there a way that maybe, depending on how we vote, that if they go with Lady Justice, the people in the background could be a little bit more prominent, not prominent, visible? Okay, so Mr. Wilson.
I prefer the first one, Lady Justice.
Okay. Nadia.
I actually prefer logo B. I'm just still stuck on the Washington State, so I'm going to go with A.
Ariana, I don't think I'm sorry, missed you there.
No worries. I think I prefer A.
Okay.
As a design, I think we're in logo B. There's like those like leaves. They just kind of seem out of place. So I prefer like A.
Okay.
I think it looks good on the eye.
All right. Dr. Brown, either or. A, okay. Okay, A, okay. So would you like to, who would like, make a motion?
I will move to adopt logo A.
So which, the color or the?
I like the color.
Okay. Is there a second? Oh, okay. Okay. Mr. Parker just said both would be used, the color and the black and white, or sepia, I guess that is more. Okay. Second? Okay, we have a second. Any other discussion?
I'd be willing to amend my motion to say logo A, but if Naris could make an attempt to make the people in the background more prominent.
Great. Okay. That being said, call for the roll call.
Eileen Delaney,
I will go with, oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Mary Ann Pintar,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes, with the necessary changes. Dr. Arlie Brown.
Yes.
Nadia Keen Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie King,
Yes.
Ariana Federico Mondragon,
Yes.
Mr. Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
That concludes the vote.
Thank you so much for your work on the logo.
Yeah.
Again, Norris, thank you very much. And maybe next month you could just send us the new revised, updated. Great, thank you. All right, new business. We did that. Unfinished business. Council, do we need to vote on these again? Okay. Do we have any updates on our unfinished business?
No, I think for the authority for me to work with county staff to pursue legislation, there are some bills out there that the county, that we are monitoring. I'll let you know if any of that impacts, if anything passes and impacts transparency of civilian oversight. And as far as B, that topic about CLERB's jurisdiction expansion will be discussed in detail, I'm sure, next week at the special meeting on March 28th.
Vice Chair Pintar.
At an upcoming meeting, when maybe the agenda isn't too full, would it be possible for you to give us an overview of some of the legislation that is pending that you are working with the county on?
I can give you an update on what's out there, what's been brought to my attention and what I've looked at. Sure.
Okay, it doesn't have to be anytime soon, but, or even if you could just circulate it to us, maybe not at a meeting, just, I'd like to see what it is that you're looking at.
Maybe with your media.
Yeah.
With some of the media.
Maybe it doesn't need to be at a meeting. Maybe you could just.
Okay.
circulate.
I'll just,
Thank you.
thank you.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you, Mr. Parker. All right. Number 9 is board member comments. Do we have any comments? Does any board member have anything that they, Pastor Spriggs?
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say that on tonight, we did have a pastor here tonight. His name is Apostle Donald Jones. He is the senior pastor of Higher Praise Christian Fellowship. He had to leave out, but he was present tonight. So for the record, I'd like to say that another pastor was in the building. Thank you.
No, this is not your last meeting.
No, not my last meeting.
Oh, yeah. You can't leave so. Okay. Do we have any other comments? Vice Chair Pintar?
Yes, I just, it never feels comfortable to me to hear the families and the pain that they're in and not be able to respond and just express my condolences. So I wanted to, again, express my condolences to the Mills family, to the Cerna family, to the family of Saxon Rodriguez, to the Gilbert Gills family, Matthew Settles, the Crawford family, and I know that they have now left, but also to the family of Alan A. I just want to make sure that you know that even though we don't get a chance to respond to you every time that you comment, we hear you and we know that you are suffering and we extend our condolences.
Thank you. I think we all feel that way. So thank you for speaking on behalf of us. Are there any other comments? Okay, with that, we will go to sheriffs and probation liaison query. Do we have any questions for the gentleman in the back there? Any questions? Did you have any updates that you wanted to provide to us?
Good evening. I do not have any current updates. I think Mr. Parker went over everything. We're still working on some of the policy recommendations that are still on the table. But we did get quite a few back to Mr. Parker. So we're still currently working on those. As those are answered, I always stay in touch with Mr. Parker and make sure that he's able to get those responses and to the board. Thank you for the in-person invite and look forward to the next meeting.
Thank you. And we will be having a new lieutenant. And unfortunately, I can't remember his name.
Well, Lieutenant Greenwald is going to another assignment.
Correct.
And the new lieutenant that is taking his place, I'm drawing a blank on the name. but-
Okay, good. I'm
Mr.
not,
Perkins, Dave,
I'm
Lieutenant Dave
Perkins, that's right.
Perkins,
Yeah.
Dave
Thank you.
Perkins. And he doesn't start till Friday.
Right.
So he'll most likely be at the next meeting if time permits, or I'll be at the next meeting.
Okay.
But we'll square that all away.
All right. And Lieutenant Greenwald, if you are out there in Zoom land, we wish you all the best. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. And with that, council, could you read us into closed session, please?
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, this board will adjourn to closed session to consider item 11 on tonight's agenda.